Hello everyone. I spent some time putting together a character in Blender, modeling, rigging, animating, the whole shebang, and thought I would upload it so that everyone else could see the process too. This isn't one continuous shot from beginning to end. I did make some mistakes and do a little bit of backtracking, but most of it's there. So anyway, let's get started. Alright, so you can see here we start by deleting the default cube and bringing in a sketch that I made in Clip Studio. And this is really helpful for getting the general proportions right. Now you see me creating a cube here, then subdividing it and roughly shaping it into the shape of the character. And this is a useful way to sort of block in your model in different parts. So you can see I'm creating the cheeks, creating the nose, creating the neck. Each one of these is just a little shape with a subsurface modifier on it. And we're just sort of slowly massaging them into place to get the general shape of the entire form. Much the same way that you might do if you're modeling with clay, and you might make each of the different parts of the model out of different little spheres of clay that you mush into the right shape. Now here's the eye, and you're going to see I make them a little bit big. A bit later on in the process I shrink them down because that is a little bit too big. But for now, those eyes are going to work, and we're going to use them as the eyes. And you see me trying something new with the neck. I replaced it with the cylinder just to make it a little bit more accurate with the neck shape there. And now I've switched into sculpt mode, and you can see me sculpting in the features. You can see the eyebrows, or the brow ridge going in there, and the cheekbones. And now for the ears. I start with a plane, and I add a few more segments to it, and you can sort of see me just sort of bending that plane into the rough shape of an ear. And now I'm going to add a subdivision surface modifier a little bit later, right now, and thicken that up. That's a great way to get sort of a thin shape that follows a form, like an ear, so that you get something that looks a little bit more like a bowl. And it's a lot easier to work with it that way than to try to model the entire thing out of a cube. Now here's my first attempt at here. I'm not going to keep this, but it was an attempt to match the image in the background there. Now I'm going to try another way to create here. You see I'm creating a Bezier curve, and I'm also creating a second curve to one curve to be the length of the strand of hair, and the second curve to be the body, the width of the strand of hair. And then I'm using the Bezier curve part of Blender to turn that into something that looks like a hair strand. So with the one curve you get the profile, the outline of the hair, and the other you get the direction it moves. And you can see that I'm making duplicates of that shape and moving it all over the head to create the individual pieces of hair that are going to form the head of the final model. And I'm twisting them around so that they all are lying more or less flat against the head. Now I'm also thickening them here. A little bit later I'm going to delete a few of those because I felt I put in a few too many. But the basic idea here is to put down sort of a clump of hair. An individual piece of hair is a little bit too much to deal with if you're trying to create a character that you can use in a video game. But if you're doing a clump of hair and you put a hair texture on it, you can get something that looks fairly realistic. And I'm just going to keep on going around the model here, moving the hair around until it roughly covers the head, and you get something that looks like a hairstyle. And you can also make the hair thicker and thinner by pressing the Alt-S key and dragging, and that will give you a nice fat bit of hair in places where you need that, and also make it thinner in other places too. And here I'm creating a little bit of a beret. Well, not a beret, it's something that you can stick your hair through in order to make a ponytail. And so here's a ponytail. This is my first attempt at the ponytail. And my first idea was to take those pieces of hair that I used for the main part of the head and just put a few of them in the back and have them hang down, but I wasn't able to get the shape that I wanted, so I decided to create a second hair profile. And you can see here this is going to be the cross section of what the hair is going to look like, and I'm creating a second hair strand with that profile, and I'm using that one single strand of hair to be the entire ponytail. And you can sort of see that hanging down there. And you can also adjust these things to change the number of grid squares or the density of the mesh. So by default you're going to get a very high density of mesh, which is probably not what you want for a low poly model, but you can turn down the number of horizontal and vertical segments to get something a lot more polygonal and a lot more appropriate for what I'm trying to do here. And you can see I'm just fiddling with the hair a little bit more to get it all in about the right shape and about the right place. And trying to get the back of the hair, because personally I find that kind of tricky. The place where the hair sort of tapers off at the back of the head forms a bit of a U shape, and it's not one of the parts of the head that you typically look at a lot, so it's a lot harder to remember what it looks like, at least I find. Okay, and what I've done here is I moved the hair to a separate layer, and now I've hidden it, so I can go back to the mesh model and combine it. So what we did first was, by moving all those deformed cubes around, we're just sort of creating the basic shape. But now what we're doing is we're taking all those pieces and we're merging them into a single piece, except for the eyes, and we're going into sculpt mode to try to make a more finished image. So what you saw there a bit earlier was just merging the ears, merging the nose, merging the main part of the face, all of that into a single mesh, and then going into the sculpt mode to increase the resolution, and then play with the model to get something a little bit more exact. And now I'm moving on to the retopology, which is basically creating a low poly mesh on top of our very high poly mesh that we just created with the sculpt tool. So essentially we're remaking the geometry, but one which follows a lot more closely that underlying sculpture that we made in the previous step. And you can see here I'm being careful to follow the rule of 4. When you're making meshes like this, it's always good to make sure that every polygon is a 4-sided shape, and sometimes it's a little bit of a puzzle to figure out the right places to cut the other polygons to make sure that you don't accidentally have triangles or pentagons in there. But I was able to figure it all out in the end. And in any case, here we are just slowly going over the entire face and creating the new mesh on top of the old mesh so that it fits, so that we have this low poly mesh that follows the curves of the high poly sculpture the high poly sculpt that we have underneath. And we're now going around the back of the head. And we're not going to go any further on the neck. We are going to do the rest of the body a little bit later, but for now we just want to make sure the head is correct. And now we're putting a loop around the ear. So for now the ear is going to be a little bit cut off from the rest of the head, but we're going to fix that later. And putting a loop around the front-facing edge part of the ear. And now we're going to build up the insides, being careful to always use quads. And just getting sort of a horseshoe shape in there, and slowly putting in the other faces, and accidentally selecting the underneath mesh there, but that's okay. And now the inside of the ear seems to be done. We're going to move around to the back. All right, and we're hiding the polygons we just did on the inside. That's so they don't get in the way when we do the back of the ear. They're still there, you just can't see them. And there go the polygons for the back of the ear. And we're filling them in more or less the same way we did on the other side of the ear. And alright, and now to connect the ear to the rest of the face. We're just putting in a few polygons just to bridge the top of the head there. Then I think we're going to go down the back and fill in the other spots where we need a little bit more geometry. It's a bit of a judgment call where to put these guys. You want them all to be about the same size. enough to be able to show the shape of your sculpture, but not too many. You want to do the smallest number you can while still maintaining a good shape and making sure that the lines flow correctly, so that when we finally get to the animation stage, if you have triangles or pentagons and you try to deform your mesh, then that will cause the shapes to sometimes distort in ways you don't want. If you use quads, you have a lot more control and you can be a lot more accurate when your mesh deforms to make sure it deforms in the way you want it. And you can see now I've actually hidden half of the mesh, and we're going inside the mouth. We're building the inside, the place where the tongue and teeth will go, and we're going to eventually pull that all the way back into the esophagus. For now though, we're just doing the bottom part of the mouth there. And okay, now for the top part, we're doing the same idea, but now we're going up across the top of the mouth. And now for the tricky bit where you have the corner of the mouth sort of pinches inside. That is actually, I find, one of the hardest bits to do, just because you have so many points in such a small space, and getting those to fit together properly. But I eventually came up with something. And you're going to see it here. Then once that's done, we can pull the entire thing back to form the esophagus, which I think we're about to do. I think right here I got a little bit confused as to how to make those 5 faces merge down to a single one. Alright, but there is the inside of the mouth, just putting a few more cuts on the bottom there. And alright, and I think I just hid the underlying mesh, and I added a smooth shade modifier to the mesh itself so that it looks a lot smoother. And now this part, I didn't actually keep this in the final. I was initially blocking the rest of the body the same way I did the head, but I decided a little bit later to switch to doing something else. So, but for now, you can sort of look on the left there. You can see all the different shapes that I was going to put in. And the reason why I decided not to go with this in the end is that if I had blocked it in like that and then gone on to the sculpt and then gone on to the remesh with the retopology, that's a long process, and I wanted something a little bit faster and something that also gives you a lot of control. Yeah, I could have gone this way too, and just as we did with the head, duplicate that leg to the other side, and then merge it all into a single sculpture, and then from there go on to the retopology. However, you see what I did instead was I dropped that for the time being, and I decided to start working on the hand. So what I just did there was I created a cube, then I made the base of it a little bit wider and added subdivision surface. Then I did the same thing to create a finger, and you can see here me sculpting a single finger, and because this is sort of a fox character, we're putting on a little bit of a curved nail, sort of halfway between an animal claw and a human fingernail. And I am playing with the shape here to make it look a little bit more finger-like, and also giving a little bit of a curve because your fingers will sort of naturally curve if you hold them in a relaxed position. And now I've made a copy, and I've turned it on the side to sort of act as the thumb. Now, the thumb isn't exactly the same as the finger because it has one less joint, but you can often use your finger template as sort of a starting point. And so you can see me deleting the bottom of the thumb part of the hand, and now I'm going to rebuild the mesh there to get it to connect. And then once I'm happy with that, we're going to just move the polygons around a little bit so it looks a little bit more thumb-like and a little bit less finger-like, which basically means making it a little bit thicker, especially in the heel of the thumb where it attaches to the hand. And now I'm going to go through with each of the fingers and attach them to the hand in a similar way. You can see I've deleted the very top of the hand and the very bottoms of the fingers. And now we're going to add a little bit of extra geometry because there are more faces on the fingers than there are on the end of the hand. And now we're just going to connect them up face by face. And being careful to try to respect that 4-polygon rule. You can see there's a bunch of triangles there right now, but we're going to fix that later. And we're just cleaning up the geometry here. And we're going to the bottom of the hand to do something similar. And one of the nice things when you're doing the fingers is that they form this sort of natural U shape. And that's sort of what I'm going for here, to sort of fix the geometry. You can see the index and the middle finger sort of form a unit with a sort of a U between them, and same with the ring finger and the baby finger. That's one nice way to make sure that those complex sort of extensions line up in the final mesh. All right, and I think we're about done with the basic geometry. I'm going to fiddle with the finger joints a little bit and pull them out a little bit so that the tops of the fingers look a little bit more like knuckles. And all right, I think we're done with the hand now, and we're moving on to the body. Now you see I've hidden the block in that we did before, and I started with a new cube, and I've just added a, well, actually I didn't do a subdivision surface. I just added the, I just used the soft tool, the smooth tool on the left side there to smooth it down and make it a little bit rounder. But basically I'm creating the mesh, or creating the figure one part at a time. First I took a cube, subdivided it, and moved the vertices around so that they fit the body part of the model. Then I just put in the legs there. Now I'm doing something similar with the foot here. And just getting each block in approximately the right position and the right shape. And then what I just did is I merged the foot with the leg. And now I'm just joining the vertices between the two to create the heel and to join that foot to the model. So we have a single piece there. And I'm going to do the same thing with the arms now. And I'm sort of ignoring the clothes for now, just focusing on the body. And taking that, I believe that's a 10-sided cylinder. No, actually I think, no, that's a 12-sided cylinder. Because I want that to match with the geometry that's already on the chest. And in any case, and here's the breast. And starting with a sphere here, and for now we're just getting it in approximately the right position and right shape. And just like with the other pieces, we're going to join them and then delete the faces we don't want, and then reconstruct the faces in between the geometry that we do want, being careful to make sure we stick to our 4-sided shapes. And that can be a little bit tricky, especially when you get to triangular areas like this. But you find that if you just relax your triangles, try to imagine the triangles that will give you the quads that will give you the least tension. That will often guide your shape into the best position, what you're looking for. And now finally we are going to manipulate the hand a little bit. I'm curving the fingers a little bit so that they form a little bit more naturally, because eventually we're going to be using Rigify to animate our model, and the default model Rigify has the fingers sort of in a naturally semi-curled position. So I'm just getting the model ready for that ahead of time, so we don't have to do as much fiddling around with the fingers when we finally get to that stage. And it also helps to get your hand in more natural position so that you can better judge that it looks correct. And shortly we're going to join this to the arm. And yeah, we can see we just made the join there, and we're joining the geometry. Now we're just going to smooth it out so that it's a nice straight shot from the shoulder down to the wrist. And I believe we're going to be shaping sort of the groin area here. And are we going to join the legs just yet? All right, and yeah, just getting the legs in position. We need to make sure that the thighs and the joint at the pelvis line up correctly, so that when we do finally join them, it's going to work. And same here with the shoulder. We're just joined the arm to the main body, and we're making sure that that connection at the shoulder is correct. And now for the neck, we're bringing in the vertices of the neck, making sure that that follows the muscles of the back. And okay, now for the behind, getting the rear end in the right position. This is kind of tricky because you need a lot of extra geometry there. I find that this position where the legs join the body, it's not as straightforward as much of the rest of the body, because most of the body can be thought of as a tube. But here you've got a lot of weird bulges and pinches, which can make it tricky to get the geometry correct. So I might, if I had this to do over again, I might not have the legs sort of sweep up in sort of an arc like that. You can sort of see that they're sort of bending in towards the hips so that they match up to the pelvis. But I've seen other models that do them a little bit more horizontally. So if I were to do this again, maybe I'd give that a shot. But you can see right now we're sort of following the natural curve there. And all right, and we've just joined the leg to the rest of the body, and here comes the tail. Because this being a fox person character, we need to have a tail. And now we have to figure out some way to attach this to the spine. And when you're doing fantasy stuff like this, there's no right answers. There's just answers that look a little bit less wrong than others. Because no one's ever seen a person with a tail like this before, so no one really knows how this is supposed to work. So that gives you a little bit of freedom. You can just make up anything and say it's correct because, who can say that you're wrong? But at the same time, some of them are going to look better than others. And here you can see me sort of guessing the correct way to join a 12-sided shape to an 8-sided hole here, and messing it up the first couple of times. And here's my second try at it. And once more, we're deleting those vertices. I think I am cutting... Oh, no, one more time. I forgot I did it this many times. Same basic procedure though. Cut the hole. I think this time I am making sure I have the right number of sides there before I start trying to join it to the tail shape there. And alright, we've joined them, and so there are the vertices in. And I think I might add an extra loop cut here. Oh, yeah, I can see that I had a little bit of trouble trying to figure out the exact way to put in the to arrange the vertices here so that everything fit together properly. But I think in the end what I just did is I deleted a whole bunch of them and then just rebuilt them from scratch. And surprisingly, that is fairly effective. It's a good way to make sure that, well, when your geometry really is getting crazy, then sometimes just deleting a whole bunch of faces and redoing the whole thing can get you a much smoother result. And you can see I've just attached it to that head retopology we did a little bit earlier, and now I'm working with the breast a little bit. When I attached the sphere to the chest here, it was a little bit sharp in my opinion, so I'm just smoothing things out a little bit, making it look a little bit more natural. And yeah, putting in a few extra cuts here to make sure that we maintain our 4-sided polygons. And also doing our best to relax the geometry, because we don't want to have a lot of tiny little faces that are sort of stuck in there. We want them all to sort of flow naturally with what else is there. And so I think we eventually did that. And just sort of inspecting the model here, and there's a hole in the back of the tail I think I just closed up there that I had forgotten from earlier. But yeah, there's our basic body mesh in place, and now we're going on to the clothing. Now, I should have added a nice neck strip here to sort of follow the line of the neck around. I didn't do that, and you can sort of see it's sort of a bit of a jagged cut here, which is why I had to rebuild a lot of this geometry here to make sure that it flows smoothly. But okay, the clothing in short, we have some of the parts of the clothing that are form-fitting, like the shirt and the shorts of the character, and other bits that are looser, like the sleeves and the skirt. And the bits that are form-fitting, like the shirt and the shorts, we're actually going to put that right on the model. So the model here isn't actually going to have any skin right where the shirt is. We're going to actually extrude the shirt from the model itself. And you can sort of see that she's sort of wearing a vest now. That's just her skin sort of extruded a little bit. So there's now a little bit of a ledge there. Now we're about to do the same thing with the shorts. And that's a very quick and easy way to make a form-fitting clothing. And I think you can see here that I just realized that I have that little corner notch there right about at the where the collarbone meets the shirt. Sort of a little triangular edge there, and that's wrong. And I've just fixed it so that it's smooth now. So I should have fixed that in an earlier stage when I was making the model, when I was sort of laying down where the neck was going to go. But no, you can do these things later on too. It's just a little bit trickier to do it at this later stage. So that's all fixed, and so here comes the sleeve. And started off with just a cylinder, and I added a solidify modifier to it to get a little bit of thickness. And I'm just making sure the ends of the sleeve match up with the end of the shirt there. And same idea here. I'm fixing the geometry on the rear end there so that it goes a little bit smoother. And now what I've just done is I've extracted a ring around the waist, and I then extruded it down, and I'm creating a little skirt here. And you can see I'm keeping it simple, not too many faces, and it's sort of parts to either side and the back so that there is room for her tail to swing out. And all right, and I think that is about the shape. I sort of gave it a bit more of a depth at the front, right under her belly button, and right back under her tail, and put it up a little bit besides legs to or a little bit higher on either side. And in any case, that's the skirt. Now for the collar, which is also a separate piece. You can see that because it's a different color, and it's just the top of the collar of the shirt extruded up and extruded out. And now we're going to turn her feet into boots here by just adding another ring and extruding that up and out and down again, and adding a solidify modifier to it to give it a little bit of extra depth. And finally, we're going to be giving her a belt. Same process. It's basically a plane here, and we're just modeling it around in a loop and using the face magnet to make sure it snaps to the body, and then giving it some depth with the solidify modifier. All right, and that is basically the clothing there. So what we're doing now is we're moving on to the UV mapping. Now this is in preparation for painting it, because we don't want it to be just a mesh. We want to give it some color. We want it to look like a painted model. And you can see that I'm starting off with the grid squares here. This is sort of a way to get a sense of how dense your model is in different places. The closer your grid squares are together, the more of the texture map you're using up. The more spread out they are, the less they are. So basically, for areas that you want to have a lot of detail in, you want to make sure that the UVs are dense enough to give you the density you want. And for areas that are less important, you can lay out your UVs so that they're a little bit sparser. But basically, you want the face to have nice coverage, and everything else you can be a little bit more relaxed with. And in any case, by default, your model is probably not going to have a nice default UV map unless it's a very special shape, like a flat plane or something else that's very flat. For a round thing like a model with lots of bumps and curves on it, we're going to need to add these edge loop seams on it so that when we unwrap the model, we get better UVs. And I think we've just done with all those seams. Okay, you can sort of see them here. I think I'm going back and making better ideas for the seams. Oh yeah, I just realized that I didn't do the seams inside the mouth. Now, not that you're going to be seeing inside the mouth a whole lot, but it's important that the entire model unwraps properly, and that includes the inside of the mouth. If you forget that, then you can have a lot of weird unwrapping when it comes to the face. And you can see here I've just switched from the colored squares to the checkerboard pattern to give sort of a better sense of how it's working. And all right, so now we're moving on to the clothing to make sure the sleeve's there, and now the belt is UV map properly. And you can see I'm sort of taking the top edge of the belt there and laying that out flat in the UV editor, and then redoing the mapping in the editor area so that everything flows nice and smoothly there. And finally here we got the top of the boots, and just going through slowly piece by piece. And all right, now for the hair. The hair is going to be treated specially. We're doing a single UV map for the entire hair. Oh, and here's the hair beret thing there. Okay, I guess all right, so because the hair is created by this curves modifier, when you turn it into a mesh, you by default get those UVs coming into sort of a square shape. So we can take advantage of that because all the hair is going to be more or less the same shape. We're taking all the UVs from each different clump of hair and we're moving them right on top of each other. Oh, before I get that, you might have just noticed there the ends of the hair. I realized at about this stage that I'd given my hair a little cap at the end, and those are triangles, and those do not play well with the UV mapping I was doing. So I just went through and was redoing the hair, and instead of having the hair end in a cap, I have the very ends of the hair pinched into a single point, which is a little bit better when it comes to the UVs. Anyhow, you can see that that little square there, that is all the different UV maps for all the pieces of hair, all moved on top of each other. And there you can just see those little flower shapes. So that's the eyeball that's been unwrapped. And I redid the eyes a little bit better so that they'd have better UV mapping. Because the trouble with that shape there is the amount of area devoted to the iris is very, very tiny. And usually when you're looking at the eyes, you want the iris to be the most important point. So we're going to redo the eyes a bit later. And but we've moved on to the painting now that I'm happy with the UV mapping. And we're starting with just a base orange coat everywhere. Before we get into a more detailed painting a little bit later on. So I'm putting on sort of the secondary albedo here because she has a lighter fur color in the belly area and under the muzzle and at the end of the tail, of course. And I'm giving her a sort of a yellow, sort of a soft leatherish. This is supposed to be emulating tanned leather here. That's the idea, at least. And putting some black caps on the ears. And I might change this design a little bit later, but for now I thought this looked decent. This is sort of based on a character I have in a comic strip that I've been drawing for a while and I guess neglecting for about a year now. I keep meaning to go back to it, but the way things are in my life, that's not so easy to keep up at the moment. Anyhow, we've just moved on to the shorts, and you can see that I am using the faces themselves as sort of a mask to make it easier to paint areas with sharp divisions between them. It's just easier to use faces as a mask sometimes to make sure you do not accidentally paint in adjacent areas. And sort of the hand painting in wrinkles on the boot there. And you can see I've just brought in the clothes there and the eyeballs. And I'm about to paint the eyes. And yeah, you're about to see exactly how tiny the iris is. If you look on the left side there in the texture map, you can see that tiny little dot in the middle is the iris. And again, later on, I didn't actually record footage for it, but I redid the eyeball with a different UV map so that iris area is much bigger. But it's going to be the same general idea. We have a black pupil and a little bit of brown around it. And now for painting the hair, now you can see I'm actually painting on the left here, and because every single piece of hair is using that little square texture there, when I paint on the texture there, the lines appear on the hair itself. This is actually a pretty efficient way to paint hair, especially because it's okay if you mess up, if the lines are a little bit messy. That looks good when you're doing hair, unlike other parts of the model. And here I had a little bit of trouble with the collar. It might not be obvious here, but the back of the collar is actually projecting through itself. It's sort of folded in on itself, and I'm just sort of fixing that a little bit. And now for the sleeves, we're painting those. And now for the skirt, and finally the belt. And the tops of the boots. And all right, there we go. And that is the basic painting there. And I decided to change the color of the shorts here. They were a little bit too bright, in my opinion. Now I'm painting in a few wrinkles for the skirt here. And going around. And I actually redid this a little bit later. If you look at later sections of the video, I actually made her shirt and skirt a little bit of a brighter yellow. And okay, and here we have her hands, painting them in brown because, you know, foxes have those dark socks on the ends of their hands and feet. And let's see, and at this point I realized I had forgotten to turn the reflection back on. So you see, I'm painting her left hand, and I'm thinking I'm painting her right hand at the same time. Then I realize, oh, I turned that feature off. I hadn't actually painted her right hand. So you can see me fix that in a bit. Yeah, I'm painting it all back to orange again. And then now that we've remembered to turn the reflection back on, I'm painting her left hand again. And you can see that it's automatically being mirrored on her right hand. All right, and at this point I was a little trying to decide what color to paint the bottoms of her hands, because I thought that the pure brown was a little bit too strong. So my first thought was to try make her palms orange, but no, that didn't really work. So you can see me using a lighter brown a little bit later. And here we go, I think. Just to give a little bit of separation between the top of the hand and the bottom of the hand, or the front of the hand and the back of the hand. So there we go. Just painting that in, and when we paint it on one side of the model, it automatically appears on the other side. And just making a little bit gray here. I think I changed it again to something a little bit brighter. Yeah. So, and you can see that, you know, when you're in the painting stage, you can change your mind a whole bunch of times. Go back in, touch up something if you're not happy with it. I think I was finally happy with this. And all right, and then I went and painted the nails something a little bit darker so that they stood out too. Okay, and I believe that was it for the painting. And oh yeah, at this point I realized I forgot to paint in the little hair thing at the back that was keeping her whole ponytail in place. And it was at this point that I realized I forgot to include the teeth and the tongue. So you can see me making an emergency edit here. Actually, I've deleted half the model now. And don't worry, we're going to get it back with a mirror modifier later. But you can see me creating a quick gum line here. And now I'm modeling a tooth. And these are going to be the canines. And let's see, we're going to put those into the jaw right there. And then we're going to make a copy of them, I believe, and pull them back. And those are going to be the molars. But we're going to make them a little bit fatter and a little bit shorter. And we're going to make a few copies of those. All right, and you know, this is not the veterinary dentation if you were to look at an actual fox skull, but it's good enough for a cartoon model. And now we're doing the same idea on the bottom. Just copied the top gums to the bottom, flipped them over, and same with the teeth. Created an extra copy of the teeth, brought them to the bottom. And now we're using a tongue to create a plane. We're going to put a solidify modifier on that too to give it a little bit of thickness. And there is the inside of the mouth. And at this point I realized I had to UV map and paint these too. So actually the first thing I did is I actually am shortening the esophagus here because I realized it was a little bit too long. Now the camera is not going to see all the way down her throat. Halfway down is more than enough. So I'm just fixing that edit here. And shortly we're going to be repainting the teeth and the gums too. And I think we also redo the inside of the mouth. All right, and you can see on the left side there, it's we're by getting rid of half the model, it actually makes it a lot easier to do the inside work. And in retrospect, I probably should have made that tongue a little bit thicker towards the back, but well, we don't actually, well, we're not going to see it that well. Well, I mean, if I decide to change the geometry a little bit later, easy enough to do. All I have to do is pull those vertices a little bit to the side. And yeah, look at those enormous eyeballs. Yeah, we're going to shrink those down a little bit later. Okay, and you can see the weird texturing on the inside. That's because by default, the UVs are for the entire texture plane there. We're going to shrink those down to something more reasonable and find a good spot for them on our UV map. If you look at the texture map on the left side, there's that little black edge on the right side, so we're going to steal a little bit of space from there for the tongue and the teeth, because right now it's not being used. And yeah, you can see me here redoing a lot of the UV mapping here, because yeah, we redid the UVs for the esophagus. And then once we laid them out again, we had to shrink them down and position them over top of the old UV texture that we'd been using. And I think we're just going to go through, fix a bit of a geometry problem there. And once more, we are redoing the UVs for the esophagus. Okay, that looks good. They're almost in the right place now. Okay, yeah, and you can see me laying out the UVs for the teeth and the gums there. And that little black area on the side is now becoming tooth and gum colored. And yeah, there go in the white teeth. All right, and you can see her dress is just sort of popped into yellow there. I didn't show it on film, but I recolored parts of it, including her dress. And so now we're moving on to rigging. What I'm doing is I'm using the Rigify rig that comes with Blender, and it by default will create a humanoid model for you, and then all you have to do is move all the bones into place, which is what we are doing right now. We're getting those finger bones positioned up so that they are inside the fingers, and the wrist and the elbows and all the rest of them too. The hand is a little bit tricky because it's got so many fine features that you need to get all the bones lined up very well. Now we're just going for the spine now, and now what I've just done is Rigify allows you to add in extra limbs too. So I'm adding in two tails here, one tail for the ponytail and one tail for the tail in the back. And now I'm going to be modifying the face that came with the humanoid rig so that it follows our sort of a more canine face here. So you can see on the bottom left is the Rigify rig. So the model we're using for a character is the human rig, but Rigify also comes with other rigs, so including a rig for a dog. So what you see on the left there is the dog rig. We're not actually using that, but I'm using that as sort of a guide so I can figure out how to modify the human face so that it gets the same shape as a dog. Because the dog's face and the human face have exactly the same bones, they're just in different positions. So I'm taking the human nose and pulling it out so that it's in the right place for the dog nose. I'm taking the human ears, I'm moving them to the right position for the fox ears. I'm taking the human jaw and moving it so it's in the right place for the fox jaw, and so on. And this was a little bit tricky, but in the end I was able to get everything in the right position. See, I am moving the underside of the chin now. Because the Rigify face rig is very particular. You can see there's some places where there's bones sort of forming, where you have three bones sort of coming together. Now the bones don't naturally sort of stick together in groups of three like that, so whenever you have what looks like a group of three bones, you actually have to do some snapping to make sure that everything goes into the right place. Alright, so I think we've got the bones in the right place. And you can see me playing with the eyes there. I think it was this point that I decided that the eyes were wrong and I redid them. So I believe they are now a lot smaller, and you can see the nicer texture on the iris there. So unfortunately I didn't have footage of that, so I couldn't include it. But trust me, the eyes are smaller and better formed, and I've also changed the eye sockets so that they fit the new eyeballs. And I've also moved the corners of the eyes up a little bit so that they look a little bit more natural. And I'm just doing another check for the bones here, making sure that all the center bones are exactly down the center, getting the eyebrow bones in the right place. And yeah, I'm not sure that the Rigify Face Rig is the best tool for the job here. I know a lot of animators like to use shape keys, but I'm not sure that it's actually possible to use shape keys in most game engines, so I'm just going with the bone face rig here. So if anyone knows better ways to rig characters, please let me know. Rigify is pretty useful and pretty dynamic. Oh, and you can see me editing the eyes here. And it's at this point I realized that I forgot to add the hole for the pupil, because if you look at actual eyes, they sort of form like a satellite dish. The iris of the eye sort of bends in like the ring of the satellite dish, and then the very middle needs to sort of go down like a hole, because the very center of your eye is a hole. So we sort of try to reflect that in the geometry of the eye too. And now I am trying to bind my meshes to the model. So you can see the eyes there bind to the eye bones, and the mesh of the character binds to the rig. And you can see I'm having a little bit of trouble with the sleeve here, because when I move the arm up, the skin of the character goes through the clothing. And I figured that out a little bit later. I consulted a tutorial, realized that I was doing this wrong. And in order to get the clothing to work properly, you need to use a feature called transfer weights. So what you do is you rig the underlying mesh first without the clothes, and then when you want some sort of floppy add-on to have similar weights, you select that extra mesh and you go into your I think the weight edit mode, and then you transfer the weights, and that way you can make sure that the weights that the underlying mesh has are reflected in the extra clothing area. And while it's not perfect, it's a lot better than trying to do it with the binding method, which is what I was doing before. So anyway, once I finished playing with the rig, I think I've reweighted it here. I switched into, I regenerate the Rigify rig, and now you can see my Rigified character. And now for animation. And if you look in the top left corner there, you can see a chart that shows how to do a run cycle, and that's just what I'm trying to animate with my character here. I'm moving all the bones, all the rig bones, into the right pose frames, and I'm trying to get the legs to match up with the reference image there, trying to get the arms to match up, and you can see me just getting the initial pose in the right place here. And now I'm going for the halfway pose at the 30 frame mark. And now for the final one. Okay, and now I'm breaking it down into those more intermediate poses to make sure that the feet are in the right place, to make sure that the arms are in the right place, just to get the character's legs and arms to match up with that reference as best I can. And it's a little bit tricky. I was reading something where they were saying that it's best to use IK or inverse kinematics to get the feet right, but forward kinematics to get the arms right when you're doing something like a run where the arms are swinging but you're not really trying to pick up anything specific. I mean, when you put inverse kinematics on the arm, that's great if you're trying to get the character to touch something specific or pick up something specific or hold their hand in one place while the rest of them moves around it. But it's not as good when your arms are just sort of swinging free. When you're in that situation, you probably want to use forward kinematics so that you can just think in terms of the arms rather than the hands. And so now we're looking at the front. So the chart on the left tells us how to get the legs in the right place, but it doesn't really tell us much about swaying side to side. So when we were in front view there, I was just pushing the hips a bit to the left when the weight was on the left leg and the shoulders a bit to the right. and doing the reverse when the weight was on the other side. And you can see that sort of working. And now I'm animating the hair and the tailbones there, trying to get it to work. I had a little bit of trouble trying to get a natural tail and hair movement. Most of my first attempts just had the hair and tail sort of flipping all over the place and not really working. So you can see my first few, I think I'm fiddling with the basic body position. It was about this point that I realized that I forgot to tilt the hands. Because if you look at the reference there, you can see that the wrists are sort of swinging up when the hand comes forward, and then the wrists are sort of twirling in the opposite direction when the hand is back. So that's what I'm doing here, to give sort of a more natural hand movement. And a lot of this is just massaging it, looking at your sort of basic run, and then seeing what you can add in to sort of humanize it and get it to work again. And yeah, more attempts to get the hair and tail to work properly. This is about where I decided to try a new technique, and I actually switched to 2D animation. So you're going to see I'm going to draw a line. I'm going to use Blender's 2D animation, the grease pencil tool, to actually draw in some lines as to where I think the tail ought to be. And let's see. So you ought to be able to see it here. Yeah, there we go. There's my first attempt. And so this way I'm sort of doing 2D traditional animation. And well, I did it in the wrong position. I just sort of bring it down so that the animation's actually coming out of the place where her tail is. And I'm just drawing in the line, going from side to side to get sort of a natural tail motion. And see, I've actually just deleted all the animation frames from the tail so that it's easier to see my hand-drawn line. And I'm just going back and forth and hand in drawing, doing a hand-drawn animation of what the tail ought to look like until I get something which I think looks correct. And then, so you can see this is going a little bit better, and the rule I'm following is that when the tail emerges from the butt, it should be going more or less straight. It should be more or less perpendicular to the butt, while the very end of the tail should be lagging behind that, and that's what's doing the actual swooshing back and forth. So it's sort of like a bit of a spring, and with a little bit of a delayed reaction at the very end of the tail. And this is working a little bit better. So I think it was about this point that I was a little bit happy with the back and forth motion. Although I've not actually animated too many tails before, so I'm not 100% sure what it should look like. And anyway, I was happy with the top-down view there, so here I'm doing pretty much the same thing, but from the side. So again, it's the what the profile of the tail would look like when you're looking at it straight on. And from the side, it's actually a little bit trickier because her butt is going up and down. So you don't have that one anchor point that it's all coming from. The anchor point keeps moving as she moves up and down from stride to stride. But eventually I get that in the right position too, and now I'm going through and I am adjusting the bones of the tail so that they follow that hand-drawn animation that I made. And that gives you a more realistic tail animation, or at least a lot more realistic than what I'd been doing before. And I felt it was a decent solution to the problem. So anyway, that is the character from start to end. And I'll leave you with this little animation so you can see the final product of all that work. Thanks for watching.